There's only one candidate who the Wall Street Journal referred to as a statesman whose refusal to compromise is legendary. There's only one candidate who's never been accused of flip-flopping. There's only one candidate who's never voted for any budget that's not balanced. There's only been one candidate who's never taken a congressional junket. All these other congressmen flying around at your expense around the world on vacation, one candidate's never gone on a congressional junket. There's only one candidate that our soldiers trust. Amen. What the media doesn't get, and what a lot of the pundits don't get, is that this candidate who supports a constitutional foreign policy, who says that we should only go to war when Congress declares it, that we shouldn't fight under a UN banner, that we should only fight for America and then reluctantly win and come home. There's only one candidate, and it's not his Achilles heel, his foreign policy. It's what's bringing out the large crowds and what may allow him to win in Iowa tomorrow. Yeah! There's only one candidate soldiers trust. The active duty soldiers have given more money to Ron Paul than all of the other candidates combined. These are the people who fight for their country. These are the young men and women who volunteered and who fight and risk their lives on a daily basis. These are the people who trust Ron Paul to be their commander-in-chief. Without further ado, I'd like you to welcome my father, Ron Paul.
Thank you very much for that nice reception, and thank Rand for that very nice introduction. That's pretty good. You did that. You stole one of my issues. I do talk about a lot of the young people. Sometimes people think, well, why do you talk about just the young people? Aren't there other age groups that support you too? But when I look out here, I don't see anybody over 40 in this crowd. Everybody's under 40. But this issue of age is something else, because I'm a little bit over 40, and but why is it that young people identify with the issue of liberty? I think there's a lot of burden being dumped on them right now, and they're starting to realize that this is happening. But I think there are two groups. I think there's a lot of individuals that have come from a different age group. But they haven't been necessarily involved in politics constantly, but they're rather frustrated with it. There's been a group that have been independent-minded. There's been a group that have sort of dropped out. They haven't been voting. Some never voted before, but finally feel energized. And that group, which I call a remnant, they believed, they understood, they knew what America was all about, but they've been disgusted with both parties, that they come together and pretend they're going to say one thing, they say one thing, and they do something else. And as Graham pointed out, young people see through this rather quickly. But I think it's a combination of bringing not only different age groups together, but people from different walks of life. This is the wonderful thing I think is all about freedom. Because freedom brings us together because we believe in freedom. We don't come together because we want to impose our lifestyles on somebody else. We want to come together to make up our own minds about how we want to run our own life. This is obviously true, and most Americans understand that when it comes to religious values. Some Americans don't even have religious values, but we don't assume it's our responsibility to impose our values on others. But we tolerate people, at least we're really supposed to, who have different religious values. So we should do this for intellectual values, and we do that pretty well. But sometimes we come up short when we talk about people's habits, and the do-gooders in Washington want to say, well, we have to do it for their best interest. One time I was sitting beside a member of Congress, and there was a piece of legislation that was interfering with personal behavior. And I said, why are you voting for this? I said, why don't you let them individuals make up their own mind? And he looked at me, and very seriously, he says, they're too dumb. And I thought, well, there's our problem. There's our problem. I think individuals that talk like that, they're lacking in a lot of respect and intelligence themselves. Individuals are. And how does this principle work on economic matters? When you make your own choices, it means you ought to be able to spend your own money the way you want. You shouldn't have to ask the government how to spend your money, and they shouldn't be spending your money. Consequence of the understanding of our system as far back as Jefferson's Declaration, where our rights come from. Our rights come from our Creator. They come to us in a natural way. Government should be limited to protecting our lives and our liberties. But if your life and your liberty is truly a gift, it should follow that you should have the fruits of your labor. They should belong to you and not the government. It is this basic understanding of liberty which made our country great. The founders understood it. They understood government. They worried a whole lot about big centralized government. And yet there was a disorganization that they weren't pleased with after the Revolution, and they decided that we should be one country. The one thing they worried about, and rightfully so, was if they had a constitution of the national government would get too big. And their concerns were justified. So they did everything they could to write into the law the limitation of powers that the people were going to grant to the federal government. And this is why the Constitution tells the federal government, of all that thou shalt not. You can't do this, this, and this. It's up to somebody else. And to reiterate that, they said that the 9th and 10th Amendment was to reserve all rights and powers to the states and to the people. Today we have forgotten about it. So in some ways, the Constitution has not lived up to the test. But we were fully warned about that. They did say, Adams in particular said that, this whole thing won't work if you don't have a moral people. If you don't have a moral people who accept the responsibilities of their liberties, enjoy their liberties, but accept the consequences of your liberties, it's not going to work. In the last 40 or 50 years, we have slipped rapidly away from assuming this responsibility. The revolution, the intellectual revolution that's going on right now, is changing that, because people, once again, not only do they look to the days when we were self-reliant, but there's another thing that's going on, and especially in the last 4 years. It's the dramatic realization of the failure of our federal government and our politicians to deliver, and they want something different. The fundamental question that the colonists asked at the time of our revolution was, what should the role of government be? And they looked at the role of government and the role of the king, and they did not like it. They did not like the bureaucrats. They did not like the military invading their homes. They didn't like the taxations and the regulations, and they were sick and tired of it. And that is what led them to rebel against the king. And when they did that, they said, well, now we have a chance. We should say what the role of government should be. And the way I understand the Constitution and the precepts of liberty is that the purpose of government is but one. It is to protect your liberties. That should be the goal. Yeah. So here we are, technically a bankrupt nation. We couldn't pay all our bills today if we had to. $15 trillion national debt. It's going to soon be over $16 trillion. $3 trillion we owe foreigners. Everything is built on debt. Our unemployment rate is much higher than they admit to. It's as high as it was in the Depression. It's over 22% when you count everybody. We have had no significant increase in jobs in the last 10 years. Our population has increased by 30 million. That's why people are feeling badly about how things are in spite of the rosy scenarios they keep painting in Washington. So if we're going to have change, if we're going to reform the system, we first have to be honest with ourselves and know what the problems are so that we can take the medicine necessary to correct our problems. Of course, one of the most important issues for me today to deal with is the foreign policy. And at times people will make charges that, oh, that foreign policy, that's old-fashioned, it's called isolationism, you don't want to deal with the people of the world and whatnot. But the truth is, the foreign policy is very significant. It's significant not only because I believe the current foreign policy does not make us safer, but makes us even more endangered. That is why I think we should change it. But it's also of gigantic economic consequence. Because in the last 10 years, fighting these undeclared wars, we added over $4 trillion to our national debt. And how would we feel safer by expending all this money overseas, fighting wars that were undeclared and never knowing when they're going to end? And very simply, the founders gave us a strict provision in the Constitution how to prevent this. That we shouldn't go to war unless you, the people, through your members of Congress, vote explicitly to give the President authority to declare a war and go to war, fight it, and win it, and get it over with. Leading up to the Iraq War. 1998 was the first year I gave a speech against the coming war in Iraq because they changed the policy and said the policy of the United States now will be regime change. Maybe well-intended by some people, but the country wasn't ready, and it took 5 more years before they conditioned the American people to say that we had to go into Iraq. Then they used excuses. Some people call it lies. That the Al-Qaeda was there. They had weapons of mass destruction. They had nuclear weapons. And that they were killing their own people, and therefore we had to go and save the country from themselves. So that war really is still going on, but it's the way we went to war that made the biggest difference, and it is a great burden. Does that mean that we're isolationists and don't care? No. If we want to change people, this idea that we can change them through force and bombs, invasions, and tell them how to run their own elections, it's not going to work. If we really want to change the world, it's the only way you can do that is to clean house here at home. Have a society that is based on the protection of civil liberties, a free market, a healthy economy, a foreign policy which offers friendship and trade to countries as our founders advised. Then, if we do a good job and set a good example, then the world will want to emulate us. Today, they resent us, and there's a big difference on that. So I vote for the principle of improving our act here, setting a good example, and getting others to want to follow our way. Us a wonderful opportunity to work our way out of this financial mess, because it is costing us a lot. Instead of saying, what are we going to do? Are we going to cut child health care or Social Security benefits to try to balance the budget next year? You know, my first proposal, my first year in office, I want to cut the budget in real terms by $1 trillion. Though we will have to cut budgets here at home, I don't start with some of the programs that we ought to try to protect. But I will start with the overseas spending. We should all come together on that. Liberals, conservatives, independents, Democrats, and Republicans, because the obligation under our constitutional oath is to protect liberty here, not to pretend that we can police the world. In order to do that, not only should we not go to these wars carelessly, but we can also extricate ourselves from around the world. Start bringing our troops home from Korea and Japan and Germany. This would make a big difference, and we can make a big cut in the budget. Even that wouldn't be enough. I have proposed to cut 5 departments. Cut them, get rid of them. We don't need a Department of Education. we also need to go to a different baseline. The baseline budgeting in Washington, D.C. means that there's an automatic increase forever. And then if you cut back that automatic increase, the automatic increase for the next 10 years is about $10.5 trillion. And the strongest proposal in Washington is to cut that $10 trillion increase down to about $8 trillion or $7.5. And then they get hysterical about all the severe cuts. No, we have to really cut. We have to cut this overseas stuff. We have to cut what's spending here at home. And I propose that we go back to the budget level of 2006, and we can cut $1 trillion the first year, and we can also balance a budget in 3 years. But the principles of liberty go one step further. Not only does it mean that we don't tell other people how to live around the world, because we can't afford it, and it's none of our business, and it leads to trouble, but we also have to deal with the expenditures here at home. And one way you can curtail the spending at home is that we change the monetary system. Because as long as politicians, right and left, can spend money, so-called to please the people and deliver anything they want, even at the cost of debt, there's a limit to taxation, there's a limit to borrowing, and right now there is no limit to the printing press coming out of the Federal Reserve. We have to deal with the Federal Reserve, we need the Federal Reserve audited, and then we need to curtail their power. Under these conditions is that the middle class shrinks. Under debasement of the currency and government spending too much, the special interests take control, and they have. And they have the influence. So it was the special interests, the powerful interests who were living off the taxpayer, were enjoying the bubble economy. When they go broke, once again, they scared the people. And the Congress said, you got to bail them out, you got to take care of them, or there's going to be a severe economic crisis. In a way, they were right. The people who were living off us would have had their crisis, but instead, the people, the Congress, and the Federal Reserve bailed them out and dumped all the debt on the middle class. I say the penalty and the bankruptcy should have been on all those privileged people who were living off you all along. To give everybody a free education and free medical care and the whole works and free houses practically, it ends up badly, no matter how well-intentioned it was. The housing programs were designed to make sure everybody had a house. A lot of people got a house, but a lot of people went and lost their jobs and lost their homes because of the artificialness of this and the other people who made a lot of money off it. Same way with education. We're educating, more people are graduating from college. They're graduating right now with $1 trillion worth of debt. And not a whole lot of them are trained to take the jobs that are going begging right now. So the government hasn't solved that problem. Education should be a local issue. It should be an issue that parents have control over, not the federal government. Because we're on a short schedule and we have to run out and get to another event. I'm very pleased with the turnout, but I would like to mention just a few more things in that I believe we're going in the wrong direction. And that has to do with the size of government now intruding on our personal privacy. The federal government should not be, if their role in privacy is that the role of the Fourth Amendment and the Constitution is to protect your privacy. But today, your privacy is being invaded all the time by the federal government. At the same time, the secrecy of government is expanding. That needs reverse. We need open government and more privacy of all your affairs. After 9/11, we had a tough time there. We had to go after Al-Qaeda. I supported this effort. I think they did a sloppy job, and we got involved in Iraq and these other places. But one thing that they passed under the guise of the emergency was a bill that was designed to undermine your personal privacy. It was called the Patriot Act. It was very unpatriotic. It does not protect you. It takes away from you. We should repeal the Patriot Act. The other issue that has been going in the wrong direction is the enforcement of local laws by the federal government. Now, just a little less than a year ago, the President announced a new policy. The policy was that the President is permitted, it's his interpretation of the Constitution, that for national security reasons, he can declare an American citizen as a target for assassination. That is not part of the American tradition. That has been done on several occasions, but just recently it was added. The President, I think, signed this bill yesterday, the National Defense Authorization Act. Very bad provision. I'm always delighted to find so many have heard about this and understand it. But what they have done there is repeal posse comitatus. It is permitting the Army to arrest American citizens to be held without access to an attorney, put in prisons indefinitely. And we have senators sort of bragging in the Senate floor by saying, well, if we have to pick up somebody that we think is a dangerous person and they come along and ask for an attorney, tell them they don't get an attorney. Well, I'll tell you what, that's not part of the America I want to live in. We want to... We want to restore the principles of liberty. Liberty brings people together. We desperately need that. We need the rule of law. We need free markets. We need sound money. We need a sensible foreign policy. And believe me, this is different than what you're getting, and it's different than you're getting from the other candidates who are part of the status quo. So if you believe in America, believe in liberty and self-reliance, then we have to change the ways of Washington right now. And I am encouraged. Things are going well. And I understand there's a very good chance that we're going to do very well tomorrow night. I hope you join me.